What would be the value of you finding clarity, connection, and peace? What's up, Active Lifers? Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. I'm Dr. Sean Pastuch. I'm your host. Today's guest is Michael Cazayoux, the founder of Soul Searching Adventures and formerly the owner of several companies you've probably heard of. Mike and I have been friends for the better part of a decade now, and he's one of the people who has had influence in me from a friendship perspective by being able to check me when I was out of alignment with my values, by being able to help me improve myself as a person, as a friend, as a significant other, as a coach. And I've always valued the conversations that we had and the way that he's been able to communicate with me. On today's podcast, he's going to share some of that with you. Remember, if you find the podcast valuable, if you're enjoying this show, please head to wherever you listen to it. Give us a 5-star rating, write a review, share this with a friend. Our intention is to share these ideas, to share these conversations, to provide positive social influence in the world. I believe that if you're finding value from these podcasts, that sharing them with your friends will help them to level up the same way that they're helping you to level up. And rating and reviewing the podcast is how those apps share this podcast with the people you don't know. And so if you can help us spread this message, I believe that you help everybody level up. And that's what we're looking to do. So please, 5-star rating, write a review, share it with a friend. Let's get to Mike. Michael Cazayoux, welcome to the Active Life Podcast again.
What's up, brother? So good to be here.
It's good to have you. And you know, there's a cliche proverb or metaphor, whatever it is, that I feel like is actually very real for the two of us right now. Because I've had you on the show, I think, twice in the past. But it feels very different this time for both because of who I am now and because of who you are now. And the thing I'm talking about is the expression that's like, no man can step in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, nor is he the same man. Have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a conversation with an old friend who, because of the way that you treat life, and I'd like to believe the way I treat life, we constantly have to reacquaint ourselves with each other.
And we're both wet.
Yes. Our feet are wet. That's good.
Yeah, that resonates with me for sure, man. And it's really cool. I noticed that I'm still feeling a little hungover from the weekend. I had a wedding and I'm just like a little bit down and low energy. And the moment I saw your face, I had this jolt of energy because I've had so much fun with you in my career. I've had so many mind expanding conversations, and you and I have done this half a dozen to a dozen times. You've been on my show more than almost anyone, and I've been on yours now a couple times. And it is cool to see this, to like, see you face to face, but also be aware of our evolution over the course of our relationship. It's very cool.
It is cool. I've told many people about the conversation that you and I had the day that you were like, hey, I would love to chat with you. I think it was a 30-minute plan where for the first half, I'll tell you the things that you do really well as a person and a friend. And the second half, I'll tell you the things I think you can improve on, and then you do it with me. And we ended up talking for like an hour and a half, I think, instead of the whatever we had planned on the front end.
Yeah, I had a lot of feedback for you. I remember you were really fucking up.
Yeah, I was being.
It went way over 30 minutes.
I was like, hey, you're great. I love everything about you. And you were like, well, I like you sometimes. Let me just share all of the terrible. No, it was valuable for me because you have always been the friend to me who was able to articulate keeping me in check in ways that other people weren't willing to do. So, for example, I remember having a conversation around a table in Seattle, and I said something about somebody who wasn't there, and you pulled me aside afterwards and you were like, hey man, I just want to give you a heads up. I understand exactly why you said that about that person. I understand exactly where that comes from. I've even experienced some of that. But if you want everyone in the room to respect you, you have to keep that stuff to yourself when you're talking about other people, because they don't know the context. They don't know anything about anything except that you just shit on somebody else. And so it's going to let them think you might shit on them when they're not around. And so they're going to be less loose about being themselves when you're in the room. That was the last time I can think of that I did something like that. And so I've always valued that about our friendship. I always knew when I was in the same space as you, I had to be the best version of myself that I knew how to be, because you would check me on anything otherwise. And if you checked me on something and I continued to be that thing, I just wouldn't have been an important person in your life anymore. And I respected that.
Thanks for sharing that, man. Yeah. And what's coming up for me is something that my relationship coach, Annie, says is we don't fall in love with our partner, like our intimate partner. We fall in love with who we get to be in their presence. And friendships are the same way. And what I just heard you say is something like, you became a better person in my presence. And I felt and continue to feel the same in yours. And one of the things that I value most in my friendships is people that have the courage to point out my blind spots. Courage, because in order to do so, we're risking the other person lashing out, getting defensive, even leaving the relationship if we're with like a volatile person. But there's nothing that serves our growth as much as someone close to us pointing out specific ways in which we're not living up to the way that we say we want to be. And I'm glad that it was received that way. And I've also gotten a ton of great feedback from you in our relationship.
Well, I also think that the risk of the loss of relationship can be when there isn't a volatile person in it. It can be that, I want to retain a relationship with this person because I enjoy spending time with them and learning from them because I think we share the same values. But if I share this with them and they walk away from the relationship because it obviates that we do not share the same values, then I was wrong about who I thought that person was, about who I thought I was to that person. And to me, that's of equal or similar risk, if you will, to losing a relationship because of some volatility. Follow me there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just a quick point, like we're so many of us, even the people like us that are in the practice of having tough conversations, what we're doing, you and I still do this to some extent. We're avoiding short-term discomfort. We're avoiding short-term discomfort. And what we get in return is years of blind spots and a lack of inner peace. We have tension in our relationships when if we can just practice stepping up to the plate and saying what we need to, even if we end up ending conversations, it saves us so much strife and tension in our lives. And it's just such an essential thing to learn and integrate into our behavior.
You mentioned your relationship coach, Annie. Now, you've been married to a D for what, 5 years, 6 years?
Almost 7 years.
Okay. 7 years, 2 kids and a dog later. Yeah?
Yep.
Exited a company together, bought a home, bought 2 or 3 homes, but you're living in one, and you own a vacation property together. From the outside looking in, what could possibly be the need for a relationship coach is what I imagine people are curious about. I'm curious because I've seen you and a D interact, and I love your relationship. I consider her a good friend of mine. I consider you a good friend of mine, and I consider the two of you good friends of mine and Kim's, as a couple, if you will. Why have a relationship coach? What is the value that you're continuing to pull from it?
Why does Tom Brady still have a quarterbacks coach?
Does he?
He definitely does.
Okay.
He has a head coach, and he has an athletic trainer, and he has a strength and conditioning coach, and he has all of these experts because he is striving for mastery, and he realizes that you don't have to wait until something's broken to make it better. And Adi and I, when we got together, we were both athletes, and we got that mindset that I just described, treating something and striving towards mastery. And it just made sense to us for whatever reason. And I can go into a couple examples of maybe how we arrived at this conclusion. But why don't we treat our relationships that way? Why don't we have a relationship coach? when things are going well? Why don't we have a therapist when things are not going well? Why don't we have a business coach? And another quote from a friend is that the best time to fix a leaky roof is when it stops raining. Most people wait until things are drastically broken in their relationship to work on it. They wait until the divorce word is up in the air. They wait until they haven't had sex for months to go out and find a therapist. And when people are in that state, half of the session, sometimes the entire session, is spent just regulating and getting back to baseline. There's not actually any productive conversation happening. If you engage with a coach when things are going well, you can learn how to communicate more effectively. You can learn about each other's needs, desires, dreams so much more quickly because you're not spending sometimes any of the session in a triggered state. Mm-hmm. And so that's a few of the reasons that we chose to start working with her 3 months into our relationship when we didn't think either had any fault at all, to now, we continue to meet with her occasionally when things are stuck, and she's become a dear friend. And so we have conversations with her often.
3 months into dating or 3 months into marriage?
3 months into dating.
Wow. Okay. That's
maybe even earlier.
Before Tahoe?
I think so. Yeah. Before Tahoe for sure. 2 months before Tahoe.
Wow. So we were in Tahoe in what, 2014, 2015?
15, yeah. In like August-ish.
Yeah, the first Brute retreat.
Wow. What a clusterfuck.
It needed to happen for everything else to happen.
Absolutely. And we had so much fun. Yeah. Just a ridiculous amount of fun.
Yeah. I miss those. I miss those for the moments that were outside of the events themselves. I enjoyed the events too, but the most that I got out of them was bonding with the attendees and the rest of the team at the Airbnb or at the restaurant wherever we went. I want to go back to why does Tom Brady have a quarterback's coach? We could hire a coach for everything in our lives. How do you prioritize which ones to hire for? Mm-hmm. So, relationships, finances, therapist, business coach. You could hire a pickleball coach if you play pickleball. Like, you could hire a coach for anything. Mm-hmm. How do you prioritize for what you're going to hire?
So the question that I ask myself often is, what's my focus in my life right now? And I tend to either hire a formal coach or I make sure I have one or more mentors in each of those things. So in my career right now, actually, it's not even career. The things that I want to improve at most right now are writing, coaching. I do in-person retreats and one-on-one coaching for people, and music. And I have a singing teacher. I've got a guitar teacher. I'm enrolled in a course to help me develop my coaching skills, and I have a writing coach. And so I hire formal coaches all the time for different things. And I realize that's a very privileged place to come from. And I'm also constantly asking people in my life or asking people that I see on the internet for support or advice on things. And in that way, I'm able to get better at things a lot more quickly without having to hire people for every single thing.
Can I push back on something that you said?
Sure.
I think it's an earned place to come from more than a privileged place to come from.
Probably both.
Well, I think you earn the privilege. So for sure. I'm curious why you felt like that was something that you needed to
say.
Yeah.
I think that I was given some advantages in life that made it easier for me than some to accumulate wealth. Mm-hmm. And that feels like a privilege that I'm very grateful for. And I also realized that a lot of people were given even more advantages than me and didn't capitalize on them and didn't take advantage of them. So yeah, maybe a feeling of wanting to acknowledge the advantages that I've been given. And yeah, I think that's it.
What are some of the advantages you're talking about?
I had two parents that loved each other deeply, that stayed together, that continued to love each other, and an extended family. Both of my grandparents are together and loved each other. All of my aunts and uncles, there's very little drama in my extended family even. I had the feeling of unconditional love by a lot of people. And that is, as far as I understand it, that's one of the biggest factors in building self-esteem. Mm-hmm. My parents, we weren't rich growing up, but I never feared us not having enough money. My parents supported me through college. They helped me with rent. And I had the feeling that I could take just about any risk I wanted to in my early career. And if I needed to, my parents were there for me financially. I did never need to ask them for financial support after I started college or like midway through college, fortunately. But the safety that I felt in order to take the risk, I think was a very unfair advantage that a lot of people don't have. And yeah.
I think it takes balls to acknowledge that in this way, especially in this world. And I want to share why. Today, it's almost as if if you didn't come from one or no parents, no money, 17 different struggles growing up, 4 people who were trying to kill and rob you, then your success is less impressive or important than somebody else's. Mm-hmm. And so acknowledging that you got a leg up in some areas and you took advantage of that leg up exposes you to people potentially saying, see, I knew he would never have been able to do this if all of that nonsense. Mm-hmm. And so I respect the way that you shared that. And I just want to express my gratitude for it.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome. We had an event recently where we brought a bunch of our clients out to talk about sales. At least that's what they thought. You know, it wasn't debate and switch. It was the best way to be great at sales is to know yourself and your product so well that you know exactly who should work with you and who shouldn't. Mm. And so that when someone says that's a lot of money or I'm concerned, I don't know if this is going to work, you are 100% confident in the words that you are saying because you've done all of the necessary work to determine if you should help this person or not. And you're making an ethical decision. That's being great at sales, not knowing what the appropriate overcome is or how to hold the appropriate tone. Mm-hmm. And we started the event by saying, Larry asked everybody, I want you to share something about you that you would like people to know. And I want you to start by saying, I would like, something I would like you to know about me is. And what's interesting is it started with a tone of things that people were insecure about. Nobody assumed they were going to talk about something that they were happy with or proud of or good at. And the first person talked about, something you should know about me is I have some financial scarcity as a result of the way I was brought up, my childhood and whatnot. And so this is really hard for me. And I'm like, well, damn. I want to make sure that this whole room knows that that is not unique to him. Mm. And so I went next. I said, something I want all of you to know about me is that I grew up with a very loving family where I never worried about money. It never was even something that crossed my mind. And so at times, I feel insecure about my relevance as a result of that. Just to show them the other side of that perspective. And I feel like that's what you just did. Instead of doing it to a room full of 9, you did it to a room full of 6,000 or however many are listening to this.
Nice.
So I appreciate that.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And what's coming up for me is that it was a time in my life where me looking as successful as possible was the most important thing. Mm-hmm. right? And so it would have been more important for you to think my story was really significant. So maybe I would have left that part out. It definitely matters to me to appear successful to you and all of the listeners for sure. But what's more important to me now is to connect with people and to let other people know they're not alone, and to give people inspiration that they can follow their dreams too. And so I think a part of doing all of that is just being really freaking honest with my story.
Can you think of a time when you weren't?
Wasn't what?
Honest with your story?
There was a time when I was a part of a business. I won't say the exact business because there are other people involved, and this is not
sure,
my story to share all of their details. But I was a part of a business with a bodybuilder, a well-known bodybuilder, and you may know who I'm talking about. And we created this product that became successful really quickly. And I really played a part in helping this get off of the ground. And then I did almost nothing for a while. And my story that I told to myself and told maybe not explicitly to the team, but implied to the team was I deserve to be paid what I've always gotten paid here because of all of the value that I brought in the beginning. And yeah, so that was the gist of it. And what I realized over time is that that was bullshit. I was paid a very high salary from the get-go. It wasn't like I was an owner in a company. This was a product under this bodybuilder's name. Mm-hmm. And it was one instance in at least several, and maybe there are still things that in my blind spot today where this is happening, where I was overvaluing my input and undervaluing others. So I was continuing to tell myself that the value I brought in getting this thing started earned me the right to continue getting paid a very high salary in perpetuity, even though I was no longer doing almost any work. And so fortunately, at some point, I had the courage to basically tell on myself and say, hey guys, I'm out of integrity here. I'm not really earning my right to be a part of this team. Another aspect was I didn't really love what we were doing anymore either. So I got out.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think, one of the things I tell people, or I speak publicly about, is the people who knew me best 5, 6, 7 years ago, who have not spoken with me in between. Like if there are people who knew me really well 5, 6, 7 years ago, who have not had conversation with in 5, 6, 7 years, they've never met me. Right? They've never met who I am today. And that's because I've had relationships with people who have been able to influence me in positive ways, where they pointed out the things like I was describing with you before. These are areas where, Sean, you are out of alignment with the integrity that you want to be in, with the stated values that you say that you have. And so if you want to be in alignment with those values, you need to change these actions, the way that you show up for these things. Or you need to change your stated values, because continuing to do that thing indicates that you value that thing, whatever that thing is. And I find it useful whenever somebody can speak publicly or even privately about the stuff that, like, hey, I have absolutely made mistakes, without simply saying I've made mistakes. I'll get to it in a bit, but I recently had an experience where I learned the difference between sharing exactly why I understand how somebody feels, as compared to saying, I understand exactly how you feel. So what are you focused on now? Because you're no longer at any of the companies that you were with when we were spending more time together. So what is it that today you're focused on?
Well, in general, I feel like I'm finally doing the work that I was born to do, and that I feel like I will be doing in some iteration for the rest of my life. So that is helping people find clarity, connection, and inner peace. And one of the ways I do that is I take men on outdoor adventures, and we do deep introspective work, small groups, way out in the mountains, disconnected from technology for a week or two at a time. And then I do one-on-one coaching for men and women for those same reasons. And the reason that I say I feel like I've found sort of my calling is I was a drug addict as a teenager. I had a recovery process that lasted about 5 years. And in that process, I became obsessed with knowing myself and experimenting with changes I could make internally, habits I could try, practices I could do that would give me more internal freedom and that would change my reality. That would just lead to me feeling more at peace and happier and more alive. And then when I did enough of that work on myself and I felt good enough, I felt this like overflowing, like I have to share this with other people. And so I sponsored dozens of alcoholics and drug addicts when I was like 18, 19, 20 years old. I started personal development programs at our companies. I assisted with group therapy. I did a number of different remote like life coaching experiments. And all of those were fulfilling for me, but they didn't feel fully authentic. They didn't feel like an authentic expression of what I was looking for. I wanted to help people, with their emotions and their relationships and wrestling with some of the bigger questions in life. And when I discovered the idea to do these trips in particular, this is called Soul Searching Adventures, I just felt like I don't know what a good metaphor is, but just like different things inside of me aligning. Like, this is so right for me. And I assumed I would enjoy the fuck out of it. And then I went out and did my first one and had the recognition that I'm born to do this work, whether it's born to do or, my innate qualities mixed with the skills and capabilities that I've built and the experiences I've had. This is just the work that I know I'm supposed to be doing, for sure in this chapter of my life.
Do you think some of the malalignment you were describing earlier in the way that you were showing up and it's compared to the way that you were being paid and the stuff you were describing in that previous business, do you attribute any of that to you doing work that you intended to have this kind of alignment for you that you thought was the closest it was going to come, but that actually was not what inspired you? Or am I just reaching there? Because I think, go ahead.
I think what you're asking is, was I always trying to find my calling or like my forever work?
What I'm getting at is the experience that you had that you just spoke about happened before all of the stuff that happened between that and what you're doing now. Right? And everything that you did in between that and now is not what you found your calling to be. Now you've realized that's what my calling seems to be. Do you think that's because it revealed itself to you or because you were continuously searching for it?
Both for sure, man. Yeah. And so how I chose and continue to choose what to do next is by following what feels most exciting to me. Okay. And I read somewhere once upon a time, maybe it's Charles Eisenstein that said this. He said, always do what's most exciting, because even if it's not your dharma, it's not your call, your final calling, when you are ready for your dharma to step into like the work of your life, you will have built the muscle of saying yes to your excitement.
Okay.
And I don't think I was ready to do this work
Right.
10 years ago. I definitely wasn't ready to do this work.
Well, how does that apply to relationships? Because from my experience at least, relationships ebb and flow in regards to excitement. And there are times in which creating excitement is the important thing to do, right? Like, it's not going to be exciting unless we make it exciting. At least that's been my experience. Is that different for you? And let's say in your relationship with your wife.
Mm-hmm. Is the question, is it going to be exciting unless you make it exciting?
Well, the question is, you're pursuing things that excite you.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine, I can only speak
specifically in work.
Okay.
In like work, creative expression.
Okay.
And so I'm not in my relationships. Novelty and excitement matters, but finding novelty in people, like new relationships all the time, that matters to me less and less. And what matters more is depth and commitment and having quote unquote old friends. That matters a lot more to me. And like in an old friendship, there's a level of safety, trust, flow that can be had that just can't in a brand new relationship. And that's what matters more to me than newness and novelty. And
in your work, you don't find that. In your work, you find it to be the opposite. You're looking for something that has newness and novelty. Is that what I'm understanding?
In my work, it's also both.
Okay.
So now I've identified. Yeah, honestly, I think if I no longer was excited by coaching and by this deep work that I'm doing with people, I would give myself, and I felt that for long enough. And I could honestly say to myself that I was feeling bored by it, not out of fear or not because I wasn't making enough money, but because I'm truly not engaged with it anymore. I believe I would be willing to step away from it. And I've done that over and over in my career. And I think it's really served me. So yes, I am continuing to seek what is exciting and novel in my career. And the way that that's showing up is right now it's in my writing. So I feel really like I love writing almost more than coaching, almost. And I'm just exploring and experimenting with different mediums. I'm starting to write fiction. I might write a little novella, like a fiction novella. And I'm exploring topics that are tangentially related, like sort of related to what I'm doing, but also kind of not. And that brings a level of aliveness to my entire life. And what that I feel like I've been operating that way most of my career. And now it's backed up by a book called Why Greatness Can't Be Planned. Have you come upon this book? No. Okay, so it was written by two computer scientists. And the thesis is that no ambitious goal can be achieved by just making that the goal. So one of the primary examples is, let's say in the 1800s, the leading scientists said, okay, we want to make computers. We want to make things that go in your pocket that have all of the information that's ever existed. They might still not have created that today, because along the way to creating computers, human beings had to create vacuums, because in the earliest computers, vacuum tubes were used. So the scientist whose ambitious goal was to make computers never would have allowed themselves to go on the tangent, the side road of creating vacuums. Because why would they do that? Right. Just for fun? Like, they never would have done that. And so what they're getting at is, when it comes to our life and our work, we can't know what the greatness will be, but the most reliable way to achieve greatness is to follow what is novel and exciting, because what is novel and exciting begets more novelty and more novelty. And what you're creating as like a personal brand, a product, whatever, is something completely distinct, something completely new and different. One more example that I'll throw out there from the book is they put two AI systems in competition with each other. And the test, the game, was to make it through a maze as quickly as possible. The first one was programmed to get there as quickly as possible. The second one was programmed to make novel decisions. So the first one that was aiming to get there as quickly as possible, it kept getting stuck. It thought it knew the best move, and it couldn't get out of that quote unquote best move when it got stuck. The second one, that's seeking novelty, it would hit a dead end, and they would have to try a new decision, try a new move, and it won every single time.
That's interesting. There are two things you said, and I keep on trying to come back to the first one, but it has to keep on going back to the next one. One of the things you said that I want to touch on is you talked about making a pivot as long as you weren't losing, as long as it wasn't about money or fear or things of that nature. It was just you lost passion for it. And I think a lot of people mistake struggling to earn a living doing something with losing passion for the thing that they would like to do. You know, it's the adage of, if I gave you $1 million and asked you to do this thing, would you wake up on fire every day to do it? Yes. So have you lost the fire because you haven't figured out how to make $1 million doing that thing? Or have you lost the fire because you actually don't want to figure out how to make $1 million doing that thing? And $1 million is a stand-in. It could be any number. Mm-hmm. Why is it so important that you mentioned the money in that situation? Because it was profound for me to hear you say it.
Because it's clear to me that doing things with making money as a primary driver just doesn't align with my values anymore. Right. I have made enough money in my life, not to live forever, but to live for several years at least, to live comfortably. I have a belief in our ability to provide for our family and our basic needs for the rest of our lives. Like a deep knowing that we would figure it out. If shit hit the fan, we lost all our money, we would figure out how to make money. And so why would I ever do something that I don't love if I don't have to?
How do you help somebody who does not have enough money to live several years to make the same decision? And the reason I'm asking is I believe the only way somebody will ever be able to make the money doing the thing that they love is to live as if they already do.
I would say, so there's this Native American quote that goes something like, first you must find your survival dance, then you can find your sacred dance. And I've been surrounded by a lot of people, a lot of different coaches, life coaches, nutrition coaches, fitness coaches, who really love the work they do, but they are not being responsible with their money, and they cannot pay bills, and they cannot afford to provide for a family. So they have not figured out their survival dance, and that creates stress, and it gets in the way of their relationships. And for those reasons, I don't always believe it's wise to just go all in on the work that you're passionate about. The most common thing that I have seen work for people, and that I suppose has been a part of my journey as well, is figuring out a stable way to make money first, and then incrementally having side projects and earning your way to doing what you love to do full time. Mm-hmm. This is easier for your nervous system to handle right? The risk is smaller when you still have a stable source of income, which can also help you be more successful in the growing of your passion project. And if you make small mistakes, small failures, it's easier to recover from. If you just go all in right out of the gate, it's easy to blow out your nervous system and for it to be, sort of a minor traumatic response, and then make it a lot harder to take risk in the future. So it's rare that I would recommend for people to just go all in on something that, is new, that they love, that they're not making money at, unless they truly have nothing to lose. If it's someone in their early 20s with no responsibilities, very low expenses, that's the time to be taking a shitload of risks. Mm-hmm. But those guys are listening to Gary Vee, and he's got a lot better advice than me for them.
So interesting, because you take those risks at that time without the education or the experience, and the risks are less likely to be successful. When you get the education and the experience and you want to be less risky, it's so paradoxical. I'm going to go back to the question I wanted to ask because it's still relevant. You mentioned that you're helping people with finding peace, connection, and clarity. Peace of what? Connection with who? And clarity of what?
I'll say the peace last because the other two fit into it. So clarity on what matters to them, what they actually value, what they actually desire in life. And when it comes to the challenges in front of them, the opportunities in front of them, what do they believe is the best right choice? And one of the things that I deeply believe in is in the power of Mother Nature. So I bring people out for a week at a time. They disconnect from their phone and they're in a beautiful, wild environment. One metaphor that I often talk about is that I look at our brains or our thoughts as like a snow globe that we're walking around with. And usually it's just shaken up, right? We got all this shit. We got responsibilities and worries and money and ideas. And somewhere in there is the exact right decisions for us to make on all of the challenges and opportunities in front of us. But we just can't see them because there's so much other shit. When you go out into nature, and especially if you go out with a handful of insightful questions, maybe some support from someone like me, the dust settles, the snow settles, honestly, without me even having to do anything. And all that's left is what really matters to me in my life and where I want to go, my dreams. Oh, that the tension in my relationship with my mom. Oh, obviously this is what I need to do. I just need to tell her what's been on my mind. Mm-hmm. And so it's clarity on those things. It's connection with just the people in our life that really matter. Our intimate partnerships, our parents, our siblings, our friends, our children. A lot of people will come on trips with me, and the typical person is very successful on paper. Some of these guys' lives look perfect, and yet they are unhappy. They're unsatisfied. A lot of them have anxiety about that because they don't know what they want to do with their life. And then they come out with me, and the vast majority of people, when it comes down to it, one of the most important things that they have to work on is their closest relationships. They think they need to find like their final calling, this big work of their life, something really significant. And some of them do. But most people realize that they've been taking people in their lives for granted, and that they connect with the fact that on their deathbed, when they look back, if they don't attend and give and just love the people in their lives more, they're going to regret the hell out of it. And so when they get clear about those, they get clarity on all of that, they learn how to better connect with the people in their lives and feel the motivation to do so. They feel grateful for the people in their lives. They're filled with inner peace.
So that's the peace with what?
Inner peace.
Right. I'm saying
peace.
When you say, I'm saying you answered it without having to speak to peace. It's just inner peace. It's calm. It's
inner peace. It's our natural resting state. There's a place deep within all of us that when we get still enough in nature, in silence, that is what is there.
I like it. I recently had an experience like that is not like that, in that insightful people or smart, driven, impressive people, the kind of people you want to be around, in a neutral site that was no one's home. It just wasn't in nature. It was in Montreal. And a lot of what you're describing came out of it. Some really, really vulnerable conversations, a lot of intensity. And then you leave and you're like, I need a week in silence to kind of recover from that and turn it into something. Mm-hmm. And that's what I left with. And I told everybody, I think I'll be back to normal next Tuesday. I got back from Montreal last Friday or last Thursday.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then it went straight to work. And so I'm traveling this week. I think next Tuesday I'll be back to like a clear head. That's my ambition. We'll see how it goes.
That's awesome, man. Just a little side comment. Anytime you do some sort of big transformational experience, like a personal development seminar, an ayahuasca ceremony, something big, like a meditation retreat, I think a big hack is to give yourself 1, 2, or 3 days on the back end to integrate. Yeah. At the end of a yoga session, every yoga session, there's a pose called Shavasana, the corpse pose, and that's the longest pose. And a lot of people think that's when the actual internal changes happen. When we're at rest, that's where neuroplasticity is actually changing things. And it can be really aggressive to have one of these big transformative experiences and then just go straight back into work. It's really easy to lose a lot of the shit we got too.
Yeah, for sure. That is a strong resonance with me. The difficulty for me is coming home and wanting to be dad. Like, I'm gone for 4 days. I want to be husband. I want to be dad. Mm-hmm. And there is no or very little like, let me think at peace about this while I'm being dad to a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, and 8-year-old. But yeah, I'm planning to tomorrow, actually, through Friday, I'm traveling to Northern California, and I only have in those 3 days, 3.5 hours of responsibility. So a lot of my plan is to kind of go find some big fucking trees and
nice.
sit amongst them. Yeah. I wanted to ask you something and it slipped my mind. That's okay. When you're thinking about helping people foster better relationships for themselves, with themselves and with other people, how do you dissociate? You're here to learn from me because you want a relationship like the one that I have. And mine is perfect. I know everything. That's why I can teach you how to do this. I'm just the guy who has good questions to ask you because you actually have all of the answers for yourself better than I do. How do you toe that line where people trust your authority, trust your ability to hold space for them, and trust themselves to come up with the answers instead of you?
Well, I am practicing sort of living out the belief that people already have the answers to their problems inside of them. And when someone has the dawning of a new realization for themselves, they have their own epiphany, they're going to follow through 10 times more than if I give them that same piece of advice. Mm-hmm. And so it's about just looking at what's most effective. I could be in a session with someone and I could rattle off 5, 10 things that are incredibly insightful and spot on. Or I could be really patient. I could listen to them and be really curious. And if they just come up with if they just realize one new thing in terms of how they've been showing up and how they can be better, oftentimes that's going to be more effective. That's going to be a better session for them.
Have you ever heard the story of the woman who Warren Buffett invested in, who then turned around and described Warren Buffett as a baboon eating a banana?
I don't think so.
So it's what you're describing. So that's what made me think of it.
I can't wait.
She was asked, what's it like to have a mentor like Warren Buffett? Like, the guy bought into your company and now he just wants you to be successful. So of course he just sits around and mentors you. What's that like? She's like, it's kind of like having a baboon eating a banana. And they were like, what do you mean? How is it like a baboon eating a banana? And she said, well, if you can imagine a baboon eating a banana, if you sat down in a room with a baboon who was just sitting there peeling and eating, and you were to share with the baboon what your biggest problem is and how you think you might be able to overcome it. And the baboon just kept looking at you and eating the banana. And you kept on explaining to the baboon why you think this might work, but what you're not sure about. And what you would do if that happened. It's like, by the time that you're done talking to that baboon for an hour or 2 hours, you have all of the answers. And the baboon hasn't given you any of them. And that's kind of what it's like to be mentored by Warren Buffett.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And I'm essentially a baboon with a banana. And occasionally I will reflect back what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, it's often in a more compressed way, concise way than they have said it to me. I might take 5 minutes and pare it down into 2 sentences. And when they hear that, they feel deeply understood. And because it's so concise, it helps them make sense of their own experience a little bit better.
How do you do that? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you do that without them feeling minimized? Because I'm understanding what you're describing. What you're describing is someone says, like, it just feels so heavy. I have all this stuff going, and then they go. And you say something like, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like you feel like you need to have a conversation with your wife and you're not sure how to start it. And they're like, yes, that's exactly is that what you're saying?
Yeah, precisely. And I've never had anyone tell me they feel minimized. Occasionally I will say that what you just said, and I'll say, is there anything else? And so if they feel like I'm leaving something off, then they'll tell me, and then I'll summarize again, including the thing that I left out.
I like that.
And so that's really helpful. Another part of this is something that Annie and I have been talking about recently, which is revolution versus evolution. All of us want revolution. We want big changes and we want them right now. And often in the very beginning of one's personal development journey, their first course, their first self-help book, they may experience some really big changes really quickly. But like with anything, after a while, the changes are slower and they are fewer and further between. A tree can take hundreds and hundreds of years to evolve, but we don't call it stupid. Mm-hmm. It's moving at exactly the perfect rate to be as hardy, resilient, and beautiful as possible. And one thing that I'm trying to do for myself first, and then to hold in my mind with my clients and just people I love, is respecting the pace of their evolution. There's a way in which at times I think I see exactly what someone needs to do and what I need to say, and I want them to make the change immediately. And this is not black and white. Occasionally that's okay for me to point out, but sometimes I may discern that they're not ready for that yet. And to to jump the gun would be disrespecting their pace of evolution. It would rob them of coming to their own epiphany or just some other aspect of their evolution. And so it would be disrespectful. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's, I have dissonance with it, even though it makes sense. You know, I feel it myself. It's not dissonance with reality in that I see a different one. It's dissonance in accepting reality. Because to me, I look at a tree and I'm like, that tree is fucking 2,000 years old. It was here when Jesus Christ was walking around. Regardless of how relevant you think Jesus Christ is, we all agree that was a long time ago. And that's a cool thing about that tree. If I go touch that tree, I'm touching something that has been here through all of the stuff that we study. And if I look at myself, I'm like, why can't I be as patient as that tree? My answer is, well, I'm not going to be here in 2,000 years. And so what comes up is, how do I have the same perfect evolution as that tree when my timeline is absolutely shorter and the clarity of how long I have is completely unknown?
So you don't need the exact same patience, but look at you, Sean Pastuch. You've already, in the span of 10 years, you've been a chiropractor that had a whole identity. Then you got like business owner in CrossFit space, totally different identity. Now you are business owner, training people in the health space in general. Like, you're changing pretty fucking rapidly compared to a tree. Yeah. A tree is just always a tree.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, it's perspective.
When I observe myself, I think you will probably corroborate this. I am working on myself harder than just about anyone I've ever met. And when I step back, it's the real changes that have stuck happen over the course of years.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about that is always, making sure to work on yourself. The thing I'm always trying to root myself in is improve yourself and only change yourself when you feel compelled to do so. Instead of changing yourself because that's what you're supposed to do, allow change to occur when appropriate. And do all of that without losing sight that there is something is real. I see a lot of people who go down the path of personal development who almost fall into nihilism as a result of it. It's like you get to the point of, what's the difference? Like, we're all just living our life in 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, a long enough timeline. We're all going to be forgotten. We're all going to be dust. We're going to be the sand on the beach. So what's the point of trying to build something right now? Why not just go enjoy your time living in the woods? And I get all of that. This side of me is like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What the fuck am I doing? Mm-hmm. And then the other side of me is like, shut up. You get one shot. This is fun. And so that's the side I listen to.
Yeah, same here. I've had countless little spirals of nihilism and none of this matters. And I was having a conversation about this just a few nights ago with someone. The antidote, I think, is following curiosity, which is essentially what you said. This feels fun, so I'm going to do this instead. If I'm present, if I'm fully present, and I just follow my natural curiosity, to me, it feels like there's an inherent meaning in that. And it calms the part of myself that makes it mean something, that this whole world is meaningless. You know what
gives me peace is the idea of like this roller coaster that we're all on, especially as it pertains to business, because business represents the ability for freedom in life. At least for me, that's the way I see it, right? Like, if I have enough money and enough purpose, I know exactly who I am. Let me back up, because I know who I am without it. I know I can predict what my day is going to look like. I can predict where I'm going to live, who I'm going to live with, what we're going to have for breakfast, lunch, dinner, if we're going to eat it, where we're going out on the weekend, when we're traveling. I like being able to predict that kind of stuff and have the security of I make enough money to do those things. And there are times when business is on a downswing. And like my mind races to scarcity. Like, what are we going to do here? And what's helpful is remembering that, like, if you're on a roller coaster, the going up part is only fun because it's suspenseful. And the down is where you're like, this is crazy. What am I doing here? And then the up again is like, oh yeah, we're okay. And it's what I'm trying to vocalize is that I'm trying to have fun in all of it, even though it's really hard to have fun in some of it. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense to you.
100%, man. Yeah. And one of the most helpful lessons I've learned related to exactly what you're talking about, I came across an article only 3 or 6 months ago. So we've all heard some version of everything happens for us. There's a big saying in the spiritual community. And I had always heard that. And I had moments where I really believed that, but I didn't know why. Like, why does it happen for us? And the article said that everything our purpose here is to evolve our consciousness. And if I step back and I look at like the development of life, everything is becoming more complex, more conscious. All life is becoming more complex and more conscious. And human beings are maybe the first living things to be aware that we're aware. Mm. And so everything in our life is coming up for us to expand our consciousness, to become aware of even more. It's life becoming more aware of itself. And I don't know if that makes sense to you. It really hit home for me. Mm-hmm. And so even the bad things, one of the purposes that they can serve is it's giving me the opportunity to surrender to the flow of life. I can either surrender to it or I can resist it. And if I can surrender to it, what am I trying to say? I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore. I can pretend and try to find my way back, but
no, it's good. I've been there. I was on a podcast actually fairly recently where I was talking about something and I went on a small tangent off to the side and totally forgot what the question was. And I'm like, I forgot what the question was. Okay. So I'm curious, what is the thing that you today know that you're good at and need to improve on the most to be the person who you want to be?
And is this personally, professionally?
Don't care.
What I'm good at is...
Well, so I wanted to, like, what I'm talking about is the same thing. You're good at it, and it's the thing that you need to improve on the most. So, for example, for me, I am good at sharing with people what I believe is important and why I believe it's important. And that is the thing that I need to improve on the most in order to be who I want to be, even though I'm good at it. So there are things I think that we do that we do well, but we don't do with a level of mastery that allows us to have the impact we want. That's what I'm speaking to.
Okay. And why do you need to get better at that thing?
I need to get better at that thing because every time I find myself doing it better, I feel a rush of momentum behind me that is the people who didn't previously understand how to best support me, finding ways to better support me because I was able to expose myself to them better.
Love it. So one of the things I'm good at is identifying where someone is playing small, hiding out, where they have a blind spot, and having the courage to directly, tactfully tell them that. Mm-hmm. And it's something that And one of my mentors named Philip McKernan, he's the best at this I've ever seen. It is such a huge gift because it cuts through people's bullshit so quickly, and it gets to the heart of where they can improve in their lives so quickly. And I think how I can get even better at this is learning to pay closer attention to my intuition. When something in my body is telling me I don't trust what they're saying or something like that. And then having even further courage to share that with them and not worry about, them stopping working with me, or maybe it even not resonating for them, or them saying it doesn't resonate for them.
I heard someone today say the reason that we need to become more is so that we can be compelled to give more. And what I'm hearing you say is that if you're able to do a better job of identifying the things that other people are maybe not aware that they are being less than 100% truthful about when they say it out loud about themselves. They're repressing something. They're holding something back. They're hiding an element of it. There's an omission of a key part that makes it what it is, that you would then be able to help them identify that more quickly and move through things more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that is related to why you work so hard to improve yourself and find those things in you?
Is my ability in that related to how hard I work?
Well, what I'm asking is, I think that it's interesting to me that the things that you work on the most for yourself is identifying your own blind spots. It's facing down what it means when you learn about what was in that blind spot so that you can make a change, so that your life can be more in alignment with the energy that you want to experience. And what you're speaking to is being able to better do that for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if you think that that's what you're so passionate about doing for other people right now, because it's what you're pursuing for yourself.
I don't know about because it's what I'm doing for myself. I think I'm just passionate about like internal peace and freedom. And so I'm passionate about that for myself and for other people.
Okay.
I'm passionate about people living as their most authentic selves. And so that's, again, for myself and others.
Yeah. What is something that I didn't ask you that you think would be valuable for people to know?
Well, something that has been on my mind some recently is something that's I just honing in on something really important for intimate partnerships. So we've probably all of the listeners have heard some version of respect is important in marriages. And what's becoming clearer to me is respecting what? So one of the things that it's important to respect is your partner's values. I think we all walk around our lives with our own values, and we think that other people should have our values. We think that other people should handle situations the same as us. They should have the same morning routine as us. They should do things like we do, and our partners more than anyone. I believe that our relationship has its own intelligence to us, to it. It's like a third entity that rests above the two people in a relationship. And the only way to tap into that intelligence is when both people's values are respected. So let's see if I can find an example. Adi and I were putting on something called Couples Camp for the first time recently. Her and I have collaborated on a lot of things in our work over the years. And this time we did so with the least amount of tension, like the most flow and ease ever. And what I noticed coming up is when we were preparing, our preparation styles are completely different. What I value is doing things quickly, getting started as quickly as possible. And I value experimentation and learning on the fly. So what we did is I did the entire first, like the rough draft of the entire itinerary of this relationship retreat that we were hosting. And that felt pretty effortless and fun to me. And then after that, she made some comments on the Google Doc, and then we sat down for a meeting so that we could go through it in fine detail. And what I was reminded about almost immediately is that she values specificity and detail and precision. And fortunately, I didn't let this out on her this time, but I was feeling fucking pissed off at how long it was taking. This was a 3.5 day retreat. It took us 2 hours to get through the first day and a half, her going through with her fine-tooth comb. And an old version of me would have and did want to berate her and make her wrong and be passive aggressive with her for taking so long. But what I got in that moment, this thing that I've been practicing, is respecting her value, respecting that if both of us get to have a little bit of our approach here, what we're going to create is so much better than what we could create on our own. And so we did that. We probably spent 5 or 6 or 8 hours going through it with her fine-tooth comb together. And she redid some things that I had suggested and inserted some new things that I never would have thought of. And we made an event that was transformational for everyone that went, and like a 10 out of 10 experience for people, with almost no like big mistakes whatsoever. And that was on our first iteration. And I think a big part of that was us both respecting each other's values. And so, yeah, just to wrap it up, oftentimes we think that our partners, we assume they see the world the way that we do, and that they should approach conflict the way that we do, and they should want to raise children the way that we do. But my mantra for myself now is I've married the most magnificent woman I've ever met in my life. She's intelligent. She makes great decisions. I trust her. And when she does something differently than me, it doesn't mean she's dumb and I'm better or any version of that. She has a brilliance that I don't have. And I'm going to interview and I'm going to be curious about what that brilliance is. And I'm going to give it an equal seat at the table of decision making. And man, that shit serves me so well. It serves our relationship so well.
Did you learn that through Annie, or is that something?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How does somebody start learning that for themselves? Like what? Like, because what I heard you say there resonated for me, because you know my wife, and she could tell you that
mom's mom. She's brilliant.
That's it. The mom's mom. She could tell you that that shirt is blue for 7 paragraphs. And I'm like, it's blue and there's some white in it. Like, I don't know. There's a design, there's buttons, whatever, yada, yada. She would be like, well, do you know where that design comes from? Like the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, thank you. Now that I've learned all of that, I still see the same shirt that I saw 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But what you're describing is to be curious. Why is that all important to her? Why does she think I need to know all of that? Why does she think that without that detail, our experience is incomplete? And then to seek to be impressed by her interest in those things and to pull something from it that moves me just a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, moves you, allows you to maybe appreciate things differently, and allows your family unit to operate at a higher level.
Yeah.
So another, small example is Adi and I were driving to dinner one night, and on the way to dinner, we were in separate cars. On the way to dinner, I realized that we were passing by the airport, and at some point in the night, we needed to drop one of the cars at the airport, and I realized we could squeeze it in. We had time to squeeze it in. I called her. I said, "Hey, let's do it." She said, "Fuck, that stresses me out. I don't want to do it, but we're going to do it." Then we pull out. She's in front. We pull out. She makes a wrong turn, and so fucks up that plan. And she calls me. She's chewing my ass because she feels like I pressured her to make this last minute stop. It ended up being this great conversation where we identified two values. My value is efficiency. I saw a way to squeeze this thing in so that we had more time, more freedom later. She values honoring her word. We were going to be a little bit late if we did my plan. Okay. And it would be really easy. And at times she did berate my efficiency value for sure. And I thought it was silly that we couldn't do this thing. Now it'd only take a few minutes on the way to dinner. But what we got to see is like, we can collaborate and we can calibrate beforehand, see who feels more, like a higher level of tense stress about a certain decision. Mm-hmm. And we can go with that one. And in the future, like, I can see how making a decision being a little less efficient would be a little more peaceful sometimes. And so getting to the core of why she wanted to act in the way that she acted showed me how I could upgrade my life a little bit. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm packing all this shit in, I'm stressed out. I make more mistakes. I'm stressing out the people I'm with, and it could be an upgrade for me. And so getting curious and interviewing, why is this important? Exactly what's important and when is it important? It can help.
Mike, you're not super active on social media these days, so where can people find you?
Well, funny enough, I'm about to make a new push because I'm building this new company that deeply matters to me. Even though I don't like social media, I see it as a tool that can amplify a message and amplify this work that I love. So I'm going to be on Twitter a lot over the next few months and maybe beyond. And so, on Instagram and Twitter, it's Michael Cazayoux, MichaelCazayoux. And I have a newsletter called The Exhale, and you can get that at mcaz.substack.com. And that's probably the best way to keep up with me is on the newsletter.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn good.